The massive alien ships appeared without warning in Earth's solar system. They came from the darkness of space like silent predators, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the sun. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on his screens. Behind him, officers from 12 different alien species worked at their stations. This was the hegemony's greatest fleet, and today would mark humanity's end. The ships formed a perfect circle around Earth. Each vessel was the size of a small city, armed with weapons that could crack continents. Admiral Kethvar had studied the humans for months. They were young, barely 200 years since they first left their planet. Their technology was simple, their ships slow and clumsy. They had a few small colonies on nearby worlds, nothing more. The intelligence reports all said the same thing. Humans were weak. "All ships in position, Admiral," reported his tactical officer, a tall Zephyrian with blue skin and 4 arms. "The planet is completely surrounded. No escape routes remain." Admiral Kethvar nodded. His own species, the Zephyrians, had ruled space for 1,000 years. They had conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and built an empire that stretched across the galaxy. These humans would be just another footnote in their history books. "Send the message," he ordered. Across all frequencies, in every human language, the ultimatum went out. The words were simple and final: surrender now or die. The humans had 72 hours to decide. After that, the fleet would turn their beautiful blue world into burning ash. On Earth, panic spread like wildfire. In New York, London, Tokyo, and every major city, people looked up at the night sky and saw alien ships blocking out the stars. The news channels played the same message over and over. World leaders held emergency meetings, their faces pale with fear. President Martinez of the United Earth Coalition spoke to the planet from the White House. Her voice shook as she read the alien demands. "We are facing the greatest threat in human history," she said. "But we will not surrender without a fight." Military bases around the world went to full alert. Earth's small space fleet, less than 50 ships, prepared for a battle they could not win. The orbital defense platforms powered up their weapons. Everyone knew it would not be enough. In space, Admiral Kethvar watched the human preparations with amusement. Their ships were so small compared to his fleet. Their weapons were like toys. He had seen this before on other worlds. First came the fear, then the desperate preparations. Then the final surrender when they realized how hopeless their situation was. "Admiral," called his science officer, "we're detecting some unusual readings." Kethvar turned to look at the display. There were tiny gravitational distortions scattered throughout his fleet formation, quantum signatures that did not match any known technology. "Explain," he demanded. The science officer, a reptilian saurian, studied his instruments. "I'm not sure, sir. The readings are very faint. They could be natural phenomena, or perhaps some kind of human technology we haven't seen before." "Human technology?" Kethvar laughed. "They can barely leave their own solar system. These are probably just sensor echoes from our own ships." But the readings continued. Small power fluctuations appeared throughout the fleet. Communications suffered brief interruptions. Ships on the outer edge of the formation reported strange shadows on their long-range sensors. Each incident was minor, easily explained away. Admiral Kethvar dismissed the reports. Human desperation, he thought. They were probably trying some primitive electronic warfare, hoping to confuse his fleet systems. It would not work. The hegemony's technology was thousands of years ahead of anything these young species could create. The first day of the ultimatum passed. On Earth, massive crowds gathered in city squares and parks. Some prayed, others protested. Many simply held each other and waited. The alien fleet hung in space like a sword over their heads, silent and threatening. On the second day, the strange readings grew stronger. More ships reported sensor ghosts and power irregularities. Admiral Kethvar ordered his engineers to run diagnostics on all systems. They found nothing wrong. The fleet's weapons remained fully operational, their shields at maximum power. "It's probably interference from the planet's magnetic field," his chief engineer suggested, "or solar radiation. These readings mean nothing." But Admiral Kethvar felt a growing unease. In all his years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something felt wrong about this operation. The humans were too calm, too prepared. When other species faced his fleet, they either surrendered immediately or launched desperate, hopeless attacks. The humans did neither. Instead, they waited. On the third day, with only hours left in the ultimatum, the mysterious readings reached their peak. Ships throughout the formation reported system glitches, sensor malfunctions, and unexplained energy signatures. Admiral Kethvar ordered his fleet to maintain position, but privately he wondered what the humans were planning. "Perhaps we should begin the attack early," suggested his tactical officer.
"End this quickly before they can try anything." Admiral Kethvar considered this.
The humans had shown no signs of surrender. Their primitive weapons were still active, their small fleet still in formation around their planet. They seemed almost confident, but that was impossible. No species could face the hegemony fleet and feel confident. No, he decided, we will honor the ultimatum. When the time expires, we will show them the price of defying the hegemony. As the final hours counted down, Admiral Kethvar stood on his bridge and watched Earth slowly rotate below. Soon that beautiful blue world would be nothing but debris and dust. The humans would join the dozens of other species that had tried to resist the hegemony's expansion. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that something was very wrong. The sensor readings were too strange, too coordinated to be natural phenomena. And the humans, why weren't they afraid? The countdown timer reached 0. The ultimatum had expired. Admiral Kethvar opened his mouth to give the order to attack. But before he could speak, a voice cut through his fleet's communications. A human voice speaking perfect Zephyrian, with an accent that suggested years of study. "Admiral Kethvar," the voice said, calm and controlled. "You're surrounded." The Admiral's blood turned to ice. Surrounded? Impossible! His sensors showed only empty space around his fleet. But even as he thought this, his tactical display began to change. New contacts appeared on his screens. Dozens of them scattered throughout his formation. Ships were decloaking. Human ships. Not the primitive vessels his intelligence had described, but sleek, advanced warships that seemed to bend light around them. They had been there all along, invisible, waiting. The humans weren't surrounded by his fleet. His fleet was surrounded by them. Admiral Kethvar stared at his screens in shock and growing terror. Everything he thought he knew about these humans was wrong. Everything the hegemony believed about their capabilities was a lie. And now, for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar realized he might be the one facing annihilation. Admiral Kethvar's flagship shuddered as every system suddenly came alive with warnings. Alert sirens wailed across the bridge while his officers scrambled to understand what was happening. The tactical display showed human ships appearing everywhere, like ghosts materializing from the void. "Impossible," whispered his science officer, all 4 of his hands dancing across his control panel. "Our sensors showed nothing. Nothing at all." The human voice continued speaking through their communications, completely bypassing their security protocols. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered our space without permission. You have threatened our people. Now you will face the consequences." Admiral Kethvar found his voice. "This is some kind of trick. Humans don't have technology capable of fooling our sensors." Captain Chen's laugh was cold and sharp. "Admiral, we've been watching your species for 50 years. We know exactly what your sensors can and cannot detect. We built our ships specifically to exploit those weaknesses." On the main screen, a sleek human vessel came into view. It was nothing like the clumsy, boxy ships in the hegemony's intelligence files. This craft was elegant and deadly, its hull covered in strange patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Energy readings from the ship made no sense according to known physics. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, "I count at least 200 human vessels throughout our formation. They're positioned perfectly to attack our most vulnerable points." Admiral Kethvar studied the display with growing horror. The human ships weren't randomly placed. They were positioned with surgical precision, each one targeting critical systems on his vessels. Engine sections, weapon arrays, command centers. This wasn't luck or accident. This was the result of detailed planning and perfect knowledge of hegemony ship designs. "How long have you been there?" he demanded. "Since before you entered the solar system," Captain Chen replied. "We've been tracking your fleet for weeks. We know every ship's name, every captain's record, every weakness in your formation. Did you really think we would let you approach our world without knowing everything about you?" The Admiral's mind raced. If the humans had been watching his fleet for weeks, that meant their intelligence about human capabilities was completely wrong. But how was that possible? The hegemony had the best spy networks in the galaxy. They had infiltrated dozens of civilizations. How could they have been so wrong about a single species? "Sir," called his communications officer, a nervous centaurian with 6 eyes. "We're receiving messages from ships throughout the fleet. They're all reporting the same thing. Human vessels have appeared next to them, sometimes close enough to touch their hulls." Admiral Kethvar felt sweat forming on his forehead. Close enough to touch? That meant the humans had been sitting right next to his ships, invisible, for hours or maybe days. They could have attacked at any time. Instead, they had waited, watched, and prepared. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire," he broadcast to his fleet. "All ships prepare for immediate combat. Target the human vessels and fire at will." "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Captain Chen's voice cut through his orders. "Look at your weapons systems, Admiral." Kethvar turned to his tactical officer, who was frantically checking his displays. The alien's face had turned pale green. "Sir, our main weapons are offline." "All of them. The power grid shows normal readings, but the targeting systems won't respond." "Impossible. Run a full diagnostic." "Already running, sir. Everything shows normal, but the weapons simply won't fire." Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge again. "Did you think we would reveal ourselves without taking precautions? Your weapons have been disabled for the past 6 hours. Your shields will fail in approximately 30 seconds. Your engines are currently running on backup power because we've been gradually draining your main reactors." The Admiral stared at his displays in disbelief. How had they done this? Hegemony ships had the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. No outside force should be able to penetrate their computer networks or disable their weapons. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Watch and learn," Captain Chen replied. Across the fleet, Admiral Kethvar's ships began experiencing system failures. Shields flickered and died. Engines sputtered and went silent. Weapons arrays powered down. In some cases, entire vessels went dark, floating helplessly in space like dead metal coffins. "Sir," his science officer shouted, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the human ships. They're charging weapons." On the tactical display, the human vessels lit up like stars. Energy readings spiked far beyond anything in the hegemony's databases. These weren't the primitive fusion weapons their intelligence had described. These were something entirely new, something that made the hegemony's most advanced armaments look like ancient toys. "Surrender now," Captain Chen commanded, "and your crews will be treated according to galactic law. Continue to resist and we will demonstrate why humanity has survived in a galaxy full of predators." Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers stared back at him with expressions of shock and fear. These were veterans of a dozen campaigns, aliens who had conquered entire star systems. Now they looked like frightened children. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "our entire battle group is defenseless. If we fight, they'll destroy us completely." The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Just hours ago, he had commanded the most powerful fleet in known space. Now he was helpless, surrounded by an enemy he had underestimated beyond all possibility. "Captain Chen," he said finally, "I demand to know how you accomplished this. Our technology should be superior to yours in every way." "Should be?" Captain Chen laughed again. "Admiral, your intelligence reports are based on what we wanted you to see. For decades, we've been showing your spies exactly what we wanted them to find. Primitive ships, basic weapons, limited expansion. Meanwhile, we've been building our real fleet in places you've never thought to look. That's impossible. Our spy networks are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Are they? Tell me, Admiral. How many of your intelligence officers are actually human?" The question hit Admiral Kethvar like a physical blow. He thought about his intelligence staff, the analysts who had prepared the reports on human capabilities. Some of them had been with the hegemony for years, trusted advisors who had provided valuable information on dozens of species. "Check your personnel files," Captain Chen suggested. "Look for officers who joined your intelligence service in the past 20 years. Particularly those with excellent service records and detailed knowledge of human activities." Admiral Kethvar turned to his communications officer. "Bring up the Intelligence Division personnel files. Cross-reference with the timeline Captain Chen mentioned." The results appeared on his screen and Admiral Kethvar felt his heart skip a beat. More than 30% of his intelligence staff had been hired in the past 2 decades. All of them had exemplary records. All of them had been instrumental in shaping the hegemony's understanding of human capabilities. Surgically altered humans, Captain Chen confirmed. We've been feeding your intelligence networks false information for decades. Every report about our primitive technology, every analysis of our limited expansion, every assessment of our defensive capabilities, all lies, carefully crafted to make you underestimate us. The Admiral's legs gave out and he collapsed into his command chair. The scope of the deception was beyond anything he had imagined. The humans hadn't just built advanced ships. They had infiltrated the hegemony at the highest levels, poisoned their intelligence networks, and manipulated their entire understanding of human civilization. Why? He whispered. Why go to such lengths? Because, Admiral, we knew this day would come. We knew that eventually the hegemony would turn its attention to Earth. So we prepared. We've been preparing for 50 years. Around the Admiral, his officers sat in stunned silence. The magnitude of human planning and deception was overwhelming. These weren't the young, naive species they had expected to conquer. These were master strategists who had been playing a game the hegemony didn't even know existed. What happens now? Admiral Kethvar asked. Now, Captain Chen replied, you're going to learn what humans do to those who threaten our families. Captain Sarah Chen's face appeared on the main view screen of Admiral Kethvar's flagship. She was younger than he had expected, maybe 40 years old by human standards, with short dark hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see right through him. Behind her, the bridge of her ship bustled with activity as human officers worked at stations displaying technology the Admiral didn't recognize. You want to know how we did this? Captain Chen asked, settling into her command chair. Very well. Consider it a lesson in what happens when you underestimate an entire species. Admiral Kethvar straightened in his chair, trying to maintain some dignity despite his hopeless situation.
The hegemony has studied humanity for decades.
Our reports indicated you were a young species, barely capable of interplanetary travel. Your reports were correct as far as they went, Chen replied. In 2157, human ships were indeed primitive. Our colonies were small and struggling. Our technology was centuries behind the major galactic powers. But that's not the whole story. She gestured to someone off-screen and new images appeared on the Admiral's display. Star charts, showing human expansion routes that extended far beyond anything in hegemony files. Secret colonies and systems the aliens had never investigated. Hidden shipyards and asteroid belts and gas giant moons. The truth is, Admiral, we detected your expansion wave long before you detected us. In 2089, our deep space monitoring stations picked up hegemony signals from the Tau Ceti sector. We realized that a massive military empire was expanding in our direction, conquering every species in its path. Admiral Kethvar studied the charts with growing amazement. If these were accurate, human civilization was 10 times larger than the hegemony believed. How did you hide all of this from our scouts? Carefully, Chen smiled. When your first probe ships reached our outer systems in 2145, we were ready for them. We made sure they found exactly what we wanted them to find. A small human presence, struggling colonies, primitive technology. Meanwhile, our real expansion continued in directions you never thought to look. The display showed a three-dimensional map of local space. The hegemony's expansion routes were marked in red, following predictable patterns based on resources and strategic value. Human expansion routes were marked in blue, weaving between the red lines like water flowing around stones. We studied your expansion patterns for 70 years, Chen continued. We learned that the hegemony always follows the same strategy. You target species along your main expansion routes, the obvious paths between major star systems. But there are thousands of systems in directions you consider worthless. Systems without rare minerals, without habitable worlds, without strategic value. Those systems are worthless, Admiral Kethvar protested. To you, perhaps, but we're not like other species, Admiral. We don't need perfect worlds or rare elements. We can build habitats in empty space, extract resources from asteroids, live anywhere we choose. While you were conquering the obvious targets, we were quietly colonizing the places you ignored. The scope of human planning was staggering. For nearly a century, while the hegemony had focused on their traditional expansion pattern, humanity had been building a parallel civilization in the spaces between. Not just a few hidden colonies, but entire sectors filled with human worlds, shipyards, and defensive installations. But the intelligence reports, Admiral Kethvar stammered. Our agents confirmed your limited expansion. They provided detailed surveys of your capabilities. Your agents reported exactly what they found, Chen agreed. Because we controlled what they found. Every time a hegemony scout ship entered a human system, we knew about it weeks in advance. We had time to hide our real assets and stage convincing displays of primitive technology. She brought up another set of images. Hegemony scout ships approaching human colonies, being met by small, clumsy-looking vessels. The human ships fired primitive chemical rockets and ion drives, struggled with basic maneuvers, and generally appeared far less advanced than hegemony technology. We built entire fleets of fake ships, Chen explained. Vessels designed to look primitive but sophisticated enough to fool your sensors. We trained our pilots to fly badly, to make our ships appear sluggish and outdated. We even programmed our computers to emit the kind of signals you'd expect from primitive technology. The energy signatures, Admiral Kethvar said, understanding beginning to dawn. The quantum resonance patterns in your ship designs, all carefully engineered to match your expectations of a young species. Meanwhile, our real ships were being built with technology you've never seen. Stealth systems that can fool any sensor array in your fleet. Weapons that draw power directly from subspace. Engines that can bend space-time itself. The Admiral looked at his own displays, showing the sleek human ships positioned throughout his fleet. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see the subtle signs of their advanced technology. Energy patterns that made no sense according to known physics. Hull compositions that seemed to absorb and redirect sensor beams. Propulsion systems that left no detectable emissions. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked, personally. "About 15 years. I was born on Ross Colony, one of our deep space installations. I've been training for this mission since I was 16. Chen's expression grew serious. "But humanity has been watching the hegemony for much longer. We have observers throughout your space, Admiral. Humans living among your populations, studying your culture, learning your languages. That's impossible. Our security screenings would detect genetic modifications." "Would they? Are you sure about that?" Chen gestured again, and the display showed personnel files from across the hegemony fleet. Intelligence officers, technical specialists, even some of Admiral Kethvar's own bridge crew. All with perfect service records, all with genetic scans that showed them to be members of their respective species. "We don't modify adult humans to look like other species," Chen explained. "We start earlier than that. Genetic therapy during fetal development, guided evolution across multiple generations. The humans you've been working with for years aren't wearing disguises, Admiral. They were born to look exactly like your people." The implications were overwhelming. If humans had been infiltrating hegemony society for decades, if they had agents at every level of government and military command, then everything the hegemony thought they knew about galactic politics might be wrong. "The Korath Rebellion," Admiral Kethvar said suddenly, "the uprising in the Vega sector. The technical failures during the Centauri campaign. All our work," Chen confirmed. "Every major hegemony setback in the past 20 years has had human fingerprints on it. We've been destabilizing your expansion, turning your client species against you, sabotaging your supply lines, not to stop your growth but to slow it down just enough to give us time to prepare." Admiral Kethvar felt sick. The proud hegemony, masters of 1,000 worlds, had been manipulated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Humans had been pulling strings throughout their empire, probably influencing major policy decisions, maybe even guiding the hegemony's expansion toward certain targets while steering them away from others. "The attack on Earth," he said. "You wanted us to come here." "Of course we did. We've been preparing for this battle for 50 years, Admiral. Every ship in my fleet was designed specifically to fight yours. Every weapon system was tested against captured hegemony technology. Every tactic was developed by analyzing your standard attack patterns." Chen stood and walked to the edge of her view screen, as if she were standing right in front of him. "Earth isn't humanity's homeworld anymore, Admiral. It's our trap. We've been using it as bait for decades, waiting for the hegemony to finally take notice, and now you're here exactly where we want you." "But your people," Admiral Kethvar protested. "The billions of humans on Earth. You would sacrifice them all?" Chen's smile was cold and dangerous. "Look at your sensors again, Admiral. Look closely at the planet you came here to conquer." Admiral Kethvar turned to his science officer, who ran a detailed scan of Earth. The results appeared on the main display and the Admiral's blood turned to ice. The planet was nearly empty. What had appeared to be a thriving world of 10 billion humans was actually a carefully constructed illusion. Most of the cities were automated, The population centers mostly empty. There were maybe a few million real humans on the entire planet. Holographic projections, Chen explained. Atmospheric processors creating fake energy signatures. Broadcasting systems that mimic the communications of a massive population. We've been preparing this deception for decades, Admiral. Earth is a stage, and you just walked into the final act of a very long play. Admiral Kethvar collapsed back into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of human deception. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. Everything the hegemony believed about human civilization was carefully crafted lies. And now his entire fleet was trapped at the center of the most elaborate military deception in galactic history. "What do you want?" he whispered. Captain Chen's expression grew serious. "What we've always wanted, Admiral. To be left alone. But since the hegemony seems incapable of leaving anyone alone, we're going to have to teach you some manners." Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as his mighty fleet began to fall apart around him. The psychological shock of discovering they had been completely outmaneuvered was destroying his officers' ability to function. Across the bridge, veteran warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds sat frozen at their stations, staring at displays that showed their complete helplessness. "All ships report status," the Admiral ordered, trying to maintain some semblance of command. The responses that came back painted a picture of total defeat. The heavy cruiser Vengeance reported that all weapon systems were offline, and engines were running at 15% power. The battleship Dominion had lost primary power and was operating on emergency batteries. The carrier Supremacy couldn't launch a single fighter because their launch bays had mysteriously sealed shut. "Sir?" his communications officer said, his 6 eyes wide with terror. "I'm receiving surrender requests from 17 ships. Their captains are asking permission to transmit surrender codes to the human vessels." Admiral Kethvar felt his world crumbling. In all his years of service, he had never heard of a hegemony captain asking to surrender. The very concept was alien to their military culture. But faced with an enemy that could disable their ships without firing a shot, that could appear and disappear at will, that had been manipulating them for decades, even the most hardened warriors were losing their nerve. "Negative," he replied firmly. "We do not surrender. We are the hegemony. We find another way." Captain Chen's voice cut through their communications again. "Admiral, I'm going to give you a demonstration of what happens to those who threaten human civilians. Please observe your ship, the Retribution." On the tactical display, one of the hegemony's heavy cruisers was highlighted. It was one of their newer vessels, armed with the latest weapons and protected by the strongest shields in the fleet. Admiral Kethvar watched as 3 human ships moved into position around it. "The Retribution's crew has exactly 60 seconds to abandon ship," Captain Chen announced. "After that, we will show you what our weapons can do." Admiral Kethvar opened a channel to the cruiser. "Captain Jorak, do not abandon your vessel. This is a bluff." "I don't think it's a bluff, sir," came the reply. Captain Jorak was a veteran Saurian officer with 30 years of experience. If he was frightened, the situation was even worse than Admiral Kethvar had thought. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. At 55 seconds, escape pods began launching from the Retribution. At 60 seconds, the ship was completely empty except for its automated systems. "Thank you for your cooperation," Captain Chen said. "Now observe." The 3 human ships fired simultaneously. But these weren't the energy beams or projectile weapons Admiral Kethvar expected. Instead, strange waves of force rippled through space, visible as distortions in the starlight. When these waves hit the Retribution, something incredible happened. The massive warship simply began to fall apart. Not from explosions or energy blasts, but as if the very bonds holding its atoms together were being dissolved. The hull plate separated and drifted away. The internal structure became visible, then that too began to disintegrate. Within 30 seconds, a ship that had taken 5 years to build had been reduced to its component atoms. "Molecular disruptors," Captain Chen explained calmly. "They break apart the strong nuclear force that holds matter together. Very effective against shields, armor, or any other form of protection. We developed them specifically for dealing with hegemony vessels." Admiral Kethvar stared at the empty space where the Retribution had been. No debris remained, no energy signatures, nothing. The ship had been completely erased from existence. The tactical implications were staggering. If humans could do this to one ship, they could do it to all of them. "You see, Admiral," Captain Chen continued, We didn't just study your expansion patterns and infiltrate your society. We also captured some of your ships over the years. Accidents, you thought. Ships that disappeared in deep space presumed lost to navigation errors or equipment failures. Actually, they were being carefully taken apart by our scientists. More images appeared on Admiral Kethvar's screen. Hegemony ships in human research facilities being systematically analyzed. Every component studied. Every system reverse-engineered. Every weakness cataloged and exploited. We know your shield frequencies, your armor compositions, your weapon specifications. We know exactly how much damage each of your ship classes can take before critical systems fail. We've designed our weapons specifically to overwhelm your defenses in the most efficient way possible. Around the trapped fleet, human ships began moving into attack positions. They moved with a precision that spoke of years of practice, taking up formations that would allow them to target multiple hegemony vessels simultaneously. Admiral Kethvar realized that this wasn't just a military operation. It was an execution. All ships, he broadcast to his fleet. Emergency Dispersal Pattern 7. All vessels attempt to break free of the encirclement. It was a desperate gambit and he knew it wouldn't work. But he had to try something. The pride of the hegemony couldn't simply sit and wait to be destroyed. The results were even worse than he had feared. Ships that tried to engage their engines found that their power systems had been even more thoroughly compromised than they realized. Several vessels that attempted to move lost all power completely and went dark. Others managed to move a few hundred kilometers before their engines shut down entirely. "Admiral," Captain Chen said, her voice almost pitying, "we've had control of your ships for hours. Did you really think we would let you just fly away?" But Admiral Kethvar wasn't finished. If he couldn't escape, maybe he could at least damage the enemy. All ships with operational weapons target the human vessels. Emergency batteries, manual targeting systems, anything that still works. Fire everything you have. A few of his ships managed to get off shots. Energy beams and missile salvos lanced out toward the human vessels. Admiral Kethvar watched with satisfaction as the attacks closed in on their targets. Then he watched in despair as every single shot missed. Not by a little, but by thousands of kilometers. The human ships hadn't even moved to evade. Somehow, the hegemony's targeting systems were so completely compromised that they couldn't hit stationary targets. "We've been adjusting your targeting computers for weeks," Captain Chen explained. "Every calculation is off by just enough to ensure your weapons can't hit anything important." Though I appreciate the gesture, Admiral Kethvar felt the last of his hope drain away. The humans hadn't just disabled his weapons. They had turned his entire fleet into a joke. Ships that couldn't move, weapons that couldn't hit, shields that were probably just as compromised as everything else. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "First, you're going to recall all hegemony fleets currently engaged in expansion activities. Every ship, every invasion force, every occupation army. They're all coming home. I don't have that authority. Actually, you do. Check your command codes, Admiral. You'll find that about an hour ago, you were promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander with emergency powers over all hegemony military forces." Admiral Kethvar's communications officer quickly checked the military database. His face went pale. "Sir, the command codes are valid. According to the records, High Command issued emergency orders promoting you and giving you full authority over all fleets." "That's impossible. High Command would never—" "High Command doesn't exist anymore," Captain Chen interrupted. "At least not the way you remember it. About 40% of your senior leadership have been humans for the past decade. The rest were removed from power approximately 6 hours ago. Arrested for treason officially. Actually, they're being held safely until this situation is resolved." The magnitude of human infiltration was beyond anything Admiral Kethvar had imagined. They hadn't just placed agents in the military. They had taken control of the government itself. "You've destroyed the hegemony," he said. "No, Admiral. We've saved it. Your empire was becoming a cancer, consuming everything in its path. Left unchecked, you would have eventually triggered a galactic war that would have destroyed dozens of civilizations. We're offering you a chance to become something better. And if I refuse?" Captain Chen's expression hardened. "Then you'll join the retribution. All of you. And we'll rebuild galactic civilization without the hegemony's input." Admiral Kethvar looked around his bridge one last time. His officers stared back at him, fear and defeat written on every face. They were warriors who had never known failure. now facing an enemy that had outplayed them so completely that resistance was pointless. He thought about the billions of beings across the hegemony, waiting for news of their great victory over the humans. Instead, they would learn that their mighty empire had been defeated by a species they had never taken seriously. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. Captain Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Now that's the question we've been waiting 50 years for you to ask." The docking tube sealed with a soft hiss as Captain Sarah Chen stepped aboard Admiral Kethavar's flagship. She walked through corridors lined with defeated alien warriors, their heads bowed in shame. The proud officers who had come to conquer Earth now couldn't meet the eyes of a single human woman who had destroyed their entire worldview. Admiral Kethavar waited for her in his conference room, no longer the confident conqueror who had arrived at Earth just days before. His blue skin had taken on a sickly pale color, and his forearms hung limp at his sides. Behind him stood his senior staff looking like mourners at a funeral. "Captain Chen," he said as she entered, "I suppose you've come to accept my surrender." "Actually, Admiral, I've come to explain why surrender isn't enough." Chen took a seat across from him, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp and calculating. "You see, the hegemony's problem isn't that you lost this battle. The problem is that you never understood what you were fighting." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. It showed the galaxy, with thousands of star systems marked in different colors. Red systems showed current hegemony territory. Blue systems showed human space. But there were other colors too. Green, yellow, purple, orange. Dozens of different civilizations, most of them unknown to hegemony intelligence. "This is what the galaxy actually looks like," Chen explained. "Not the simplified map your strategists have been using, but the real political situation. Every colored dot represents a different species, a different government, a different potential threat to your expansion." Admiral Kethavar studied the display with growing amazement. The hegemony controlled less than 10% of the inhabited galaxy. There were vast regions of space filled with civilizations they had never heard of, empires that might be even larger than their own. "Impossible," he breathed. "Our exploration fleets would have detected these civilizations." "Your exploration fleets found exactly what we wanted them to find," Chen replied. "Admiral, do you remember the Kepler incident? 15 years ago, one of your scout fleets encountered what you thought was a primitive civilization in the Kepler system. Your ships were destroyed by mysterious weapons, which your analysts concluded were some kind of natural phenomenon." "I remember. Command decided the system was too dangerous to investigate further. Those weren't natural phenomena. That was the Kepler Collective defending their territory. They're a machine intelligence that controls about 300 star systems. They view organic life as a virus to be contained, and they were perfectly willing to destroy your entire scout fleet to keep you away from their borders." More details appeared on the display. The Kepler Collective's territory was marked in purple, a vast region of space that the hegemony had avoided for decades without realizing why. "The Vorthon Empire," Chen continued, highlighting a green section. "A warrior culture that makes your species look peaceful. They control 600 star systems and have been watching your expansion with growing interest. Their battle fleets are designed for one purpose: total annihilation of enemy civilizations. The ethereal dominion," she pointed to a yellow region, "energy beings who can manipulate matter at the quantum level. They find physical species amusing but expendable. The hive clusters, orange dots scattered throughout the galaxy. Insectoid species with a collective consciousness. They reproduce so quickly that they can replace battle losses faster than you can inflict them." Admiral Kethavar felt his heart sinking with each new revelation. The hegemony wasn't the dominant galactic power he had believed. They were just one medium-sized empire surrounded by dozens of other civilizations, many of them more advanced and dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "Because we've been talking to them for 70 years, Chen smiled. While the hegemony was following predictable expansion patterns, humanity was making contact with everyone else. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through trade, diplomacy, and mutual cooperation. The display changed to show communication networks spanning the galaxy, lines of contact between human space and dozens of other civilizations. Trade routes, diplomatic channels, military alliances, and information-sharing agreements. "You see, Admiral, humanity learned something very important when we first detected the hegemony's expansion. We realized that in a galaxy full of predators, the only way to survive is to make sure the predators fight each other instead of fighting you. What are you saying? I'm saying that every time the hegemony encountered mysterious obstacles to your expansion, every time your fleets disappeared in dangerous regions of space, every time your conquest plans were disrupted by unexpected resistance, it was because we were guiding you away from civilizations that would have destroyed you. Admiral Kethvar stared at the display in shock. The hegemony's expansion pattern, which had seemed so logical and strategic, was actually a carefully constructed maze designed to keep them away from serious threats. The humans hadn't just been watching the hegemony, they had been protecting them. The Draconis campaign, he said suddenly. We lost 3 fleets in that sector. Command concluded the region was unstable. The Draconis region is controlled by the Void Stalkers. They exist partially outside normal spacetime and can phase their ships through solid matter. Your fleets weren't destroyed by instability. They were hunted by creatures that could become incorporeal at will. The Titan Nebula disaster. 17 ships lost to gravitational anomalies. The Titan Nebula is home to the Stellar Engineers. They build planets and modify stars for fun. Your ships were dissolved because you flew into their construction zone without permission. Every major hegemony military setback of the past 50 years was being recontextualized. What they had seen as random failures or natural disasters had actually been encounters with civilizations so powerful that humans had spent decades steering the hegemony away from them. Why? Admiral Kethvar asked. Why protect us? Because despite your flaws, you're still rational beings capable of growth and change. Some of the civilizations out there aren't. The Void Stalkers consider organic life a delicious snack. The Machine Collective wants to convert all biological matter into computational substrate. The Entropy Cult actively seeks to destroy the universe and return it to primordial chaos. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the disabled hegemony fleet. Believe it or not, Admiral, the galaxy is a better place with the hegemony in it than without it. But only if you can learn to coexist with everyone else. What are you proposing? Chen turned back to face him. The hegemony will undergo some changes. Your military will be restructured for defense rather than conquest. Your government will include representatives from your client species instead of ruling them as subjects. Your expansion will be limited to uninhabited systems, and any new colonization will require approval from the Galactic Coordination Council. The what? An organization that's been managing interspecies relations for the past 30 years. Every major civilization is a member. Well, every civilization except the hegemony. You were never invited because you wouldn't have been interested in cooperation. The holographic display changed again, showing a massive space station orbiting a neutron star. Ships from dozens of different species were docked at its ports. The architecture was unlike anything in hegemony files, incorporating design elements from civilizations Admiral Kethvar had never even heard of. Council Station Harmony, Chen explained. The diplomatic heart of the galaxy. Representatives from 237 different species work together to prevent conflicts, coordinate trade, and share scientific discoveries. It's been there for 3 decades, right in the middle of space you thought was empty. How did we never detect it? Because you were never meant to. The Council decided long ago that the hegemony wasn't ready for galactic society, but humanity argued for giving you a chance. We've spent 50 years preparing for this moment, Admiral. The chance to bring the hegemony into the galactic community. Admiral Kethvar looked around the conference room at his officers. They were listening to Captain Chen with expressions of awe and terror. Everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong. Everything they believed about their place in it was an illusion. And if the hegemony refuses these terms? Chen's expression grew cold. Then you'll learn why the other civilizations wanted to sterilize your space and start over. Admiral, what you've seen here today is just a tiny fraction of human capabilities, and humanity is considered a mid-level power by galactic standards. She gestured to the viewport, where human ships were visible throughout the disabled hegemony formation. Every ship in my fleet was built specifically for this mission. We have hundreds of other fleets designed for different purposes, ships that can travel between dimensions, weapons that can crack moons, defenses that can hide entire star systems. But more importantly, we have friends. The Ethereal Dominion thinks your energy-based technology is interesting. The Stellar Engineers could help you build better worlds. The Vorthan Empire respects strength and might be willing to trade military knowledge. The Machine Collective could teach you computational techniques that would advance your civilization by centuries.